Love is one of the most powerful forces in our lives, yet it often comes wrapped in contradictions. Have you ever felt deeply connected to someone only to find them pulling away? Have you ever wondered why the person who claims to love you the most sometimes seems to ignore you the most? Love, at its core, requires a level of vulnerability that can feel terrifying. To truly love someone means opening yourself up, your thoughts, your emotions, your past wounds, and your deepest hopes. And when it's standing in front of another person without the shield of pretense or perfection. And that kind of exposure is scary. Many people fear love not because they don't want it, but because they fear what comes with it: rejection, disappointment, or even loss. When you love deeply, you risk deeply. You risk not being enough. You risk being misunderstood. You risk showing parts of yourself that you have carefully hidden, perhaps even from yourself. For some, the natural reaction to this fear is avoidance. They pull away, not because they don't care, but because they care so much that the thought of getting hurt is unbearable. Ignoring becomes a way to manage their emotions, a protective barrier against pain. Think about it. Have you ever loved someone so much that it scared you, that being close to them made you feel exposed, almost fragile? Maybe you wanted to say something, to express how much they meant to you, but instead you chose silence. Not because you didn't want to speak, but because the words felt too heavy, too risky. Ignoring someone you love isn't always a conscious decision. Sometimes it's a deeply ingrained response to the fear of loss. If you don't engage, if you create distance, maybe, just maybe, you can avoid the pain of rejection. Maybe you won't have to face the possibility that your love is not reciprocated in the way you hope. But here's the paradox. The very act of pulling away often causes the very pain we were trying to avoid. Love thrives in openness, in connection, in the willingness to be seen. And yet fear convinces us that the safest path is to retreat. So if you've ever felt ignored by someone who loves you, try to see beyond their silence. Sometimes their distance is not a reflection of how little they care, but of how much. And if you are the one pulling away, ask yourself, is your fear protecting your heart? Or is it just keeping you from experiencing the love you truly want? True love requires courage. It asks us to lean in when we want to step back, to speak when silence feels safer. Vulnerability is not weakness. It is the foundation of every meaningful connection. And those who embrace it, despite their fear, are the ones who experience love in its truest form. Love, when it is deep and genuine, has a way of consuming us. It stirs emotions that we sometimes don't know how to handle: the joy of connection, the fear of loss, the anxiety of imperfection. It can all become too much. And when emotions become overwhelming, the easiest response is often to withdraw. Some people experience love in a way that is so intense, it feels like they are drowning in their own feelings. They don't just love in a simple, effortless way. They love with everything they have. Their mind constantly races with thoughts like, am I doing enough? Am I saying the right things? What if I mess this up? And when these emotions reach a tipping point, their instinct isn't to express more, it's to step back. For them, ignoring is not an intentional act of cruelty or indifference. It's a defense mechanism. It's their way of pressing pause, because their heart and mind are working overtime, processing emotions they may not even fully understand. Think about it. Have you ever felt so strongly about someone that you didn't know what to do with all those feelings? That just seeing them, hearing their voice, or being around them made you feel like your emotions were spinning out of control? Maybe you wanted to reach out, but the weight of your emotions made it easier to stay silent. Maybe you felt like if you said too much, if you showed too much, you'd somehow lose control of yourself. This is the reality of emotional overwhelm. When love feels too big, some people freeze. They struggle with expressing their feelings, not because they don't care, but because caring so much makes them feel exposed, even powerless. Their heart is full, but their words fail them. Their mind is overrun with emotion, but their actions don't reflect it. And this is where misunderstandings happen. The person on the receiving end of this silence may feel neglected or unwanted, interpreting the distance as a lack of care. But in reality, the one who is withdrawing may be battling their own emotional storm, trying to make sense of what they feel, trying to figure out how to love in a way that doesn't feel like it's swallowing them whole. So if you've ever been ignored by someone you know cares about you, take a moment to consider what they might be going through. Sometimes love doesn't disappear, it just becomes too heavy to carry all at once. And if you are the one who tends to withdraw when emotions run high, ask yourself, is this distance truly helping me? Or is it just keeping me from experiencing love in its fullest form? Love isn't meant to be controlled or suppressed. It's meant to be felt, shared, and embraced. Emotional overwhelm is real, but love flourishes when we learn to sit with our feelings instead of running from them. When we find the courage to express what's in our hearts, even when it feels like too much, we create space for real connection, and that is where love truly thrives. Love is rarely a straight path. It's a dance, a delicate rhythm of closeness and distance, of reaching out and pulling away. This push-pull dynamic is one of the most complex aspects of relationships, and it often leaves both people feeling confused, frustrated, or even hurt. But at its core, this back and forth is not necessarily a sign of a weak connection. In many cases, it's a sign of love struggling to find balance. Have you ever noticed how in relationships, one person sometimes leans in just as the other pulls away, and then when the one who pulled away finally reaches back, the other person starts to withdraw? It's almost like an unspoken game of emotional tag. One partner always chasing, the other always retreating, until the roles switch again. This is the push-pull of connection, and it happens more often than we realize. But why does this happen? If two people truly care for each other, shouldn't they always be moving toward one another instead of in opposite directions? The answer lies in the deep human need for both intimacy and autonomy, the desire for closeness versus the need for space love makes us crave closeness. We want to feel seen, understood, and cherished. We want to share our lives, our thoughts, and our emotions with someone who truly gets us. But at the same time, love also makes us aware of our vulnerability. When we get too close, we start to feel exposed. We fear losing ourselves in the relationship, or worse, getting hurt if things don't go as planned. So we push and pull. Sometimes we pull someone in because we need reassurance. We want to feel their presence, their love, their warmth. But then when we get too close, we panic. What if we become too dependent? What if they leave? What if we lose our sense of self? And in that moment of emotional overwhelm, we pull away, not because we don't care, but because we care so much that it scares us. On the other side, the person experiencing the withdrawal often reacts in the opposite way. When they sense their loved one pulling away, their instinct is to reach out even more. They try to close the gap, to bridge the distance, to prove that they are still there. And yet the more they reach, the further the other person may retreat. And then something fascinating happens. Once the person who pulled away feels like they have regained some emotional space, they start reaching back. But by then, the other person, exhausted from chasing, has started to pull away themselves. And so the cycle continues. The illusion of indifference, when we're caught in this push-pull dynamic, it's easy to misinterpret what's really happening. If you're the one being pulled away from, it might feel like you're being ignored, like your love isn't valued, or like the other person simply doesn't care. But in reality, their withdrawal is often not about you. It's about their internal struggle between love and fear, connection and independence. Likewise, if you're the one pulling away, you might not realize how your need for space is affecting the other person. You may not intend to hurt them, but your silence can feel like rejection. And if you're the one constantly chasing, you might not recognize that your persistence, while coming from a place of love,